Welcome to the Stumbling Forward podcast. Progress isn't always linear, and it's rarely perfect, but it gets us where we need to be. I'm your host, Erika Taylor-Beck, the founder of Authentic Foundations, a business dedicated to creating online courses and one-on-one coaching to improve the way that we view and do leadership. Hello, and welcome to the next episode of Stumbling Forward. I'm Erika, your host, and today I am talking with Susan Gates. Susan, hello. Thank you for joining me today.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. I'm excited to learn more about you and share about the wonderful things that you are doing.
Yeah, there's a lot of things on the horizon, so I'll try to keep it brief. But hello, my name is Susan Gates. I am a transformation soul purpose coach, and within that, there are a whole bunch of other things too, including breathwork, hypnotherapy, astrology, Akashic records, and all those good things. But essentially, my whole goal is to help people find their own true path, and which sounds very vague, I know, but it is something that is very personal to each person. That is my whole goal, the thing that I really want to do. I want to help people find their own inner voice, their intuition, and let that guide them forward.
I think that is beautiful, and it's needed. Maybe it's because of the folks that I'm connected with on social media and different channels now, where maybe it's more of a like-minded group, but it seems like so many people are seeking what makes them happy and unique and fulfilled. And what we've always been sold of get a job, you go to college, you get your degree, you go somewhere, you stay there a really long time and maybe retire there if you're lucky. That's not the case anymore. And people don't necessarily want that anymore. They're seeking out the things that make them really come alive and feel unique. How do I break away from the rat race and the hamster wheel of going to figure out what those things are? How did you stumble into this? Something that really made you light up?
That is a very good question, and I feel like it was very much stumbling into it. I never would have thought that this was something I would do. I was always adamant that I would never have my own business. Here I am. And so it really started. I was in the corporate world. This is actually my last week, so I'm really excited because I am officially going to be out soon. I've been working this corporate job for years, and that hit a breaking point where I was like, this is not working for me. I'm not happy. I am not going anywhere. And I went through, I guess what you would call a dark night of the soul, right? Where you're questioning everything about your life and what is going on, and went on a spiritual retreat, a solo retreat, and that I would consider was basically my big spiritual awakening, where I started to really go into the depths of who I am, why I am the way I am, and what I actually want. And that wasn't clear then. This was back in 2021, so 4 years ago. And I think over these past 4 years, it's been starting to become a lot more clear. I started my business in 2023, and even then, even though I knew that coaching was something that I wanted to do and something that I wanted to help people with, I didn't have a whole lot of clarity then. It really has been a lot of stumbling forward, going through and picking up like the breadcrumbs that I get along the way and trying to decide whether or not this is right for me. You had mentioned like the people that we're surrounded with on social media. I don't know if that's part of it, but I feel like there are a lot of opinions out there on how you should approach your business or how you should do things. So it's been a huge learning curve in terms of what makes me unique, how do I want to operate, and what feels right for me. Long story short, it's been a journey.
It's just starting to, which is crazy in a sense because it feels like so much has already happened. But you're right, there are a lot of different voices online and different coaches and schools of thought when it comes to coaching. There are a lot of the spiritual led coaching and like the service based, and then there's kind of the old school marketing and social media, and it can get really overwhelming really quickly to figure out what is the right way to do something. And I say quote unquote right way to do something because really what works best is what feels natural and aligned, because something might be successful for one coach or for one business owner because that's their personality and their vibe. But if you were to try to take that same blueprint and use it, it's not going to feel right for you. And in fact, it will actually to detract from what you're offering because it's going to feel off. So yes, there are some blueprints out there of things that have worked and things that you should do or you can do and ways to figure out what your purpose might be. But there's still this very unique element to it that you really can't follow somebody else's path. Even if they outline it to a T, it may not work for you. And that sucks for people, especially those who want the done for you kind of business or those who are not in touch with themselves yet, you have to go through that process of figuring out you.
Yeah.
And it does slow things down a bit because it's not a fast track to profit, but
Right.
it's a short term, in a sense, pain for a long term gain that once you
Mm-hmm.
figure that out and do that work, it's going to be successful longer term versus a shortcut of here's what worked for somebody else. It's hard and it's easy to
Yeah.
get distracted by all of that. And so there are some people out there that might be aligned. Definitely follow those, but trust your gut and I hate to say it, do the work. You gotta put in the time to figure those things out. The tools that you talked about that you use Akashic records and breath work and different things, all of it really comes down to slowing down and
Mm-hmm.
deprogramming and unlearning a lot of the things
Mm-hmm.
that we have learned.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there is a ton of pressure starting out to make it be successful. I think it may have been internal. I know there was a little bit of external pressure. My mom constantly asking, "How's your business going? Do you have any clients?" and things like that. And it was tough coming to terms with the fact that yes, it can be a slow process. It probably is going to be a slow process, but I think once I accepted that, there was a lot more peace in it. Because you touched on a good point where it was like you come back into that same mindset of following somebody else's path or following somebody else's idea of how you should run your business or how you should operate or what you should do even in the broader scope. So stepping back away from those tendencies of this neatly laid out path for me that I'm going to follow and it's going to be fine. It's going to lead you right back to where you started when you decided to quit the corporate world and start your own company because it's not you.
There
Mm-hmm.
is pressure because everybody wants to hear, all right, do you have customers? And I know that they mean well, but it
Yeah.
does make you feel bad to be like, no, or I had one or two.
Mm-hmm.
It does take some work, but if you can shed those expectations and say things are moving along, I've been building this, I'm building out whatever it is I'm doing, and talk about the stuff that you're doing that is making progress, that maybe isn't
Mm-hmm.
visible to somebody else, but here are the frameworks I'm putting in place, it will help you to realize where you are making growth. Because when
Mm-hmm.
you look at it from a dollar standpoint, maybe it's not successful yet. But when you think about where was I 6 months ago and where am I now, I have so much stuff built out. I'm building a network. I'm connecting and doing these things. If you think about it from that perspective, it takes a little bit of that pressure off because you have to build a framework. You can't just build a house with a roof. Like, you've got to start from the bottom. People are
Yeah.
looking for the roof and the money, but I needed to build a foundation, and I'm doing that. I'm now putting up a floor plan, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
know anything about building houses, obviously, but you know,
It's a pretty good analogy though.
yeah, you need to start somewhere, and it might not be
Mm-hmm.
seen to other people, and it might make you feel inferior, but it's a mindset shift, and that's something that you help with is that helping with that mindset shift and focusing on some of those growth pieces.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like the roots of who you are incredibly important, right? It shapes you as a whole. So when you're thinking about it from a business perspective, same sort of thing applies. Do you have something stable to work off of? If not, then, let's reevaluate that. What does that actually mean to you? What's important to you? And what is going to support you in the long term? And it's been a learning experience going through that myself on a personal level for shadow work and things like that, but then also for applying it within the business framework as well. I don't know. It's interesting because every once in a while you'll get these subtle hints or drops from the universe or whatever you want to call it. It just leads you closer to where you're going or what you want to be, and it can be frustrating sometimes waiting for that. But it's
Yeah.
definitely well worth the wait.
For sure. You mentioned the hints from the universe. It whispers. Your intuition is a
Mm-hmm.
whisper.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with ego, your ego mind, but it's meant to keep you safe and it tends to keep you small because that's what's familiar and what they know is comfortable.
Yeah.
But
It's
your
also very loud.
intuition, right, your ego is screaming and like do this, don't do that, don't do that. But intuition's maybe try this. And then if you are listening to your ego or if you're just distracted or focusing on expectations and other things, it's so easy to tune out. And that was a thing that I still am working on because as I get wrapped up in doing the stuff for the business and whatnot, my mind is busy on I need to edit this podcast, I need to do this, I need to
Mm-hmm.
schedule that, that I forget to check in and just feel and
Mm-hmm.
listen and notice some of the synchronicities and things because they're very easy to overlook. For somebody who maybe is newer to all of this or maybe just starting or thinking about starting, do you have any tips around intuition and how you can check in for those who I don't like to meditate?
Yeah.
How do I hear or notice these whispers when everything else seems like it's so much louder?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I feel like it's really easy to miss those whispers, right? Everybody has access to their intuition and it's just a matter of actually listening to it. But it also comes in different forms too. So some people really get a lot of intuitive insights through their dreams, or they get a lot of intuitive insights just when they have an idea where, oh, maybe I can try this. If it's a maybe sort of thing, then that's usually probably your intuition because it's rarely you need to do this right now. That's your ego. And so paying attention to those little things that kind of come along the way, it was helpful for me to start writing things down as I got them and seeing how they landed. I remember there was this one time I was cooking in the kitchen, getting ready for a friend who was coming over, and I was really excited because I was going to tell her that I was pregnant at the time. And while I was cooking, I got this little idea in my head, oh, it would be funny if she was pregnant too. And I was like, that's really random, whatever, and continued to cook. And then when she got there, I had like a little board that said how many weeks along I was, and she saw it and she just started jumping up and down. She was like, I'm pregnant too. And so it's little moments like those where you have the instant confirmation, understanding what that sounds like in your brain and when it happens, what you're doing even. For me, doing something helps activate that because it quiets the mind. When you're working on something intensive, doing tasks for your job or your business, it can get drowned out really easily, right? But if you're doing things that you enjoy, creative projects for me are really helpful, or getting outside and going on hikes. I find that to be really helpful for listening to the things that come in. I am not very good at sitting and meditating. I will be the first to admit that. So having other practices like breath work, where I get to set my mind to a task that is trivial in a sense, nothing too difficult or complicated, that allows the space for your intuition to drop in a little bit more.
I like that. And that's a common thing that I've been hearing from folks too is moving your body. If you have to really think about the task and really focus, it's going to be hard to notice something else because you are
Mm-hmm.
focused. But if it's something where you almost do it mindlessly, and maybe it's coloring and you're, oh, I'm going to pick
Yeah.
red, and you're just like, but while you're doing that, your body is moving, but your brain is kind of off. And that's when you
Mm-hmm.
might get a thought of, I need to call my aunt just
Mm-hmm.
randomly. And you're like, oh, that's weird. I wonder why I thought about that. And I think we tend to hear that and think, that's weird that I thought about that. But sometimes it's not you that's thinking
Yeah.
that. It's your intuition giving you
Mm-hmm.
a nudge. And
Yeah.
where I have kind of missed the mark is what am I doing when that thought happens? Because sometimes that's what's tied to it. But I have missed the connection. What a random thought. And then I go about
Mm-hmm.
whatever I'm doing. And
Yeah.
so I love what you said about the notebook. And then if you go back later and you look at it, you start to notice patterns that maybe you don't notice in the moment. It doesn't have to be anything really long or complex. Just
Mm-hmm.
jot it down just to get
Mm-hmm.
it out of your head. And then when you look back, you start to notice these trends that around this time or when I go here, when I do this thing, something pops up and there's more to it than that. And it's just so easy to overlook when you're busy and everybody's busy
Mm-hmm.
because you've got families, you have kids, you've got a job, you've got clean your house, you've got to go to the grocery
Yeah.
store, you got to cut your grass. But for me, cutting the grass is actually a good time because I can let my mind wander. And sometimes I have the most random thoughts when I'm doing that. And it's also being outside too, which I enjoy. So that's
Yeah.
super helpful.
Yeah, and I think it's just accepting too that it comes differently for everyone. It doesn't have to look like the Buddhist monk sitting and meditating for hours a day or doing breath work, or it can be simple and things that happen in your day-to-day life. As you were talking about it, I was thinking about, I think you said you're somewhat familiar with astrology, right? So there's the concept of like, Virgo and Pisces, they're on an axis. And Virgo is like the day to day, like everyday life, right? And then Pisces is more of like the spiritual, higher mind, higher consciousness. Usually there is a relationship between the two. If you can shift back and forth between those pretty easily, I think that is beneficial in terms of being able to access more of that higher consciousness without getting too engrossed in the details. I think for me, it's really easy to get distracted and do a bunch of different things. And so like being able to be in a mindless kind of role is really helpful. Like I remember when I used to work at a Starbucks in college and I actually really enjoyed that and never really understood why. But it's that same sort of thing where once you know how to make all the drinks. It's all just a mindless, automated, this is what I'm doing. And I could basically shut my brain off. And I feel like I did have a lot more intuitive insights coming through while I was doing that. So really just finding that space for yourself is helpful.
So working now from home, it's hard for me, especially in this office, to feel open and meditative because it's where I do all my stuff. I've got
Yeah.
the computer and I do the podcast and where I do editing, and it's really hard for me to just shut down in here. I have to step out. So maybe sometimes your home isn't that space for you. Maybe it is getting outside or going somewhere where you can almost disappear in something. Yeah, it's good to figure those things out. So the tools that you use, have you found one to be most helpful for you as you were kind of figuring out what your path was?
As far as what's been most helpful for me, they all have their own purposes in a way where I tend to struggle like with some of the more intuitive tools when it comes to myself, but for whatever reason can easily access that information for other people, for Akashic records or for tarot or astrology or those sort of things. Like when I'm doing it for somebody else, it comes through very easily. Whereas when I do it for myself, my ego gets in the way, where my brain is overanalyzing and it doesn't come through. And so doing like holotropic breathwork was really helpful for me because it basically shuts off the portion of your brain that is overthinking and it allows whatever information to come through unfiltered, essentially. Doing that was really helpful. Some guided meditations was really helpful too. And I feel like each one of those tools had its own purpose along the way. Hypnotherapy was awesome for, rewiring subconscious beliefs. I think it's trying to find the right time or the right tool for the right situation. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it does. It's unique, but I think it would
Yeah.
be so frustrating to be able to so easily read for other people and have that block for yourself. And it makes sense why, because again, ego and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
and you know too much about the subject.
Yeah.
When you're doing somebody else, I don't know you. I don't know any preconceived
Mm-hmm.
ideas. So what I get is very clear and I'm just sharing it. Where for you, comparing notes. But
Yeah.
what was the breath work that you mentioned? The one that kind of shuts off part? I don't think I've ever heard of that.
So holotropic breathwork, I don't actually do that as a practitioner. Mine is more somatic based, but holotropic breathwork is essentially a form of breathwork that almost mimics like a psychedelic experience because the breathing patterns will limit the amount of oxygen that goes to your brain. And so with that creates DMT in your brain. And if you're not into using substances or plant medicine or things like that, then that's another way of basically having those sort of experiences where things that may be buried deep within your subconscious come to the surface and you're able to have a lot of those emotional releases. And you'll see people may start to scream or they may start to cry uncontrollably or whatever because they've been holding on to these memories or these repressed feelings for basically their entire lives. And it gives an opportunity to release that.
That's fascinating. I've never heard of that. I've seen videos of people doing certain types of work where people are just,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, crying, big release of emotions, and
Mm-hmm.
that is super interesting.
Yeah.
The Akashic records, that's something I want to learn more about. I know everybody
Yeah.
can access it, and I,
Mm-hmm.
I have connected with a friend of mine who is in the UK, but she was able to do an Akashic reading for me and
Nice.
help get some basic stuff.
Yeah.
And she's like, you can do all of this yourself. And I know I can, but I haven't sat down to figure it out yet. And then I have blocks, and so I start to doubt myself because I came from this very logical background, and
Mm-hmm.
it's hard for me to not get in my own head and start to feel more. So that's something where I'm sure I can do it, but I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
And that's hard. One question for you maybe is when I meditate, and I love guided meditations, I almost always fall asleep. And I don't want to fall asleep. I want to just be quiet and
Yeah.
allow things. And I don't know if that's the ego shutting it down or if it's because I have to almost be asleep to allow it to be free. But I feel like I can never just meditate and be zen in the moment. It's almost a little too zen. And then I'm Z's on the couch somewhere. How do you stop yourself from falling asleep so that you can get the benefit of it? I seem to not be able to find that middle ground.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I feel like that happened with me too a lot. I would regularly use sleep meditations because it would easily put me to sleep, right?
Yes.
So the thing is, when you get into a meditative state, your brain waves are transitioning over closer to the state that your brain is in when you're sleeping. So it's a very fine line of being able to dip into that really quickly. But I think the key here is one, if you fall asleep, then it's usually your body telling you that you need the sleep. You're probably not getting enough sleep. I know that was definitely the case for me, but trying to do meditations at night is a no-go for me because I will instantly fall asleep. Doing something in the morning is helpful if you've already woken up. And one of the things that I found interesting that is helpful in the type of breath work that I do, it's essentially an energized meditation. You start off by doing movement, and that helps, one, wake you up in a sense, but then two, also get rid of any excess energy that you're holding on to that may be preventing you from being able to access those higher levels or those different brainwave states. So figuring out when is the best time to do it. And maybe it's during the daytime where you're getting the sunlight that prevents the melatonin from being produced and trying to find what works for you there.
That makes sense. And I probably need to make sure I'm like sitting up and not ever lying
Yeah.
down. I'm going to practice it that way instead. We'll try it
Yeah.
and see. I'll let you know how it goes.
Okay.
But when people come to you, what types of things are they looking for? So do they come and say, I'm looking for X, Y, and Z, or I'm struggling with a certain, maybe a tool that you're using. Maybe I'm looking
Yeah.
for an Akashic record reading. How do they approach you?
That's a good question. I think it's been varied, and that's a hard thing to pinpoint too. Where it's always down to the feeling of being stuck, and it's usually multifaceted. It's not just one area of life that is the main issue. Oftentimes, it's been relationship based, and there's relationships kind of play an impact or play a key role in what's going on for them, but it's more of this general, I don't know where to go next. I've been doing life, I feel like I've been successful, or I'm in a good place, but something just feels like it's missing. And that's essentially exactly how I felt when I first started down this path too. I think everything's going right, like everything seems to be okay, but it's not. Internally I feel like a little empty, and so it's getting from that state to a place of being more fulfilled with life is really just a journey inward, and understanding why am I not fulfilled with what's going on, or why am I feeling this way about certain things, why are these relationship issues coming up. And that's why I like having all these different tools in my tool belt, because everybody's going to need something a little different. Some people really like to talk and they can find the key insights through that. Other people like having physical representation, so tarot or astrology, and then other people like being told in a sense. And I guess hypnotherapy, you're not really telling, but I mean, I do a recording that's like helps reinforce a lot of what we did in the hypnotherapy. And so it varies, honestly.
That's really interesting stuff. And what you said resonated because that's where I was when I had quit. Before I quit, I had my spiritual awakening while I was still working in corporate. And at the time I was at a place that I loved, but I was supposed to have left, and wasn't meant to be there long term. I ended up getting laid off because I was missing the signs and missing the intuition of maybe it's
Yeah.
time to step out. And I was like, maybe not. And finally it was okay, you got to go. But I was in a really good role. I really enjoyed my team. I was married, was happy in most areas of life. There's no reason why I shouldn't be happy. But I kept feeling like there was something missing and something that I was supposed to be doing and supposed to be helping more, and couldn't figure it out. And I had met somebody who does animal communication. That kind of opened the door to Reiki and tarot and pendulums and just different things. And there's still so much out there because I know a little bit about astrology. I know a little bit about human design. I
Yeah.
know of the Akashic records. I haven't done them myself. I know there are so many other tools and things out there, but it's a little overwhelming of how many tools are available. If you don't know, like I again grew up and we never really talked about any of this stuff. And so when it happened, I was about 40 and opened all these doors to new things that I hadn't really experienced. Again, I mentioned at the beginning, if you don't know that it's out there, you don't know that you can use it or how to benefit
Mm-hmm.
from it or that it's even an option. And that was something for me that took a little bit of time to figure out. What I had been doing, what I had learned wasn't all that there is to life or the world. There's a whole other part that we never really discuss unless you're in that environment. And so as you start to open up these doors and learn new things, there's a lot of opportunity to get in touch with the world, with nature, with yourself on a whole new level that you wouldn't imagine. It disrupts a lot once you start to go down that path because sometimes you outgrow, jobs or relationships and people and things, and so there's a lot of growth, but also grief as well because you do mourn what used to be as you step into what is coming. Honestly, I have a much happier perspective of life now that I know these things than I did before, but it's still a lot to learn and it can be very overwhelming, especially if you're not either open-minded to it or that if you just don't believe in it at all. How do you handle situations like that, trying to get people to understand it? If they're coming to you and saying, look, I'm feeling stuck, but I don't have a clue what to do. And you're like, let me talk about astrology. And they're like, whoa, 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 Susan, that feels fake. Have
Yeah.
you run into that or are people already open to what you're offering?
I'd say it's kind of a mix. The first client that I had was in his 60s, so not at all what I would consider my ideal client avatar or whatever. He just found me I had a booth at a like metaphysical expo, and his wife had dragged him there. So he was just wandering around talking to people. I talked to him, and then he like on the spot decided to sign up with me. And the way I was kind of doing it before was laying it out in a way that was a little bit more structured and more progressive as you got into that. The introductory information was very science-based, because I think a lot of people have a lot easier time accepting things that have scientific research behind it to back it up. That was me too, honestly. Like, engineering degree, very logical, scientific mind, that sort of thing. I used to reject all things woo-woo and out there. So to me, it made sense to look at it from, we're going to progress from things that are well backed in research, things relating to the mind, how your mind works, the psychological attributes and things like that, and then progress slowly into things that are a little bit more out there, like somatics. Like, that's something that's starting to gain a little bit more traction, but still a little out there for some people. Like, they don't really understand it. Like, people talk to you about like EFT. I remember the first time I heard about it, I was like, that's weird. It's gradually moving into not taking them from, hey, here's the Akashic records, and I know all these things about your soul or whatever. I can tell you all these things. That's not going to work for a lot of people who have never really gotten into this world. And with him, very much had to take it here, the fundamentals about your mind, and let's do some exercises related to that will help open up your perspective and see how these relate to who you are and how you operate today. And then going into your body, what are you still holding on to within your body that may be limiting you? And then diving into, the soul piece, where it is really connecting to your intuition, connecting to these woo-woo tools like astrology and Akashic records and things like that. And it's really fascinating to watch him go from the very beginning stages all the way to the end, where he was like, yeah, okay, I believe in this stuff now. You've kind of been able to show me that it makes sense too. And I enjoyed that aspect of it, of like being able to explain some of those things and help him understand, so that it wasn't just so out there.
That's awesome. He's not your ideal client. Not honestly, not even the typical person that I would think of
Yeah.
when thinking about this kind of work. Typically, I think of women. I know there are men out there that do this, but I see a lot of women, probably like in their 20s to 40s or so. And
Mhm.
being a man that's in his 60s, that's really awesome that he, one, was interested enough to try it, but
Yeah.
two, then really believed in it. And I'm like you, same thing, just didn't grow up with it, didn't believe in it, didn't know about it. And didn't have anything against people that did do it. I just thought that they were, I hate to say it, but like hippies in a sense, just a little bit more out there and living free. And good for them. That's great. Okay. And now I realize they actually had it right. They're
Yeah.
doing and how they're embracing it. And my business is focused on leadership and corporate type things, but I use some of these elements because
Mhm.
I think it's helpful for people to get grounded and settle in themselves before they're able to approach others and lead others.
Mhm.
And I think right now, like I mentioned before, people are waking up to some of this and realizing there's more to
Mhm.
life than what I've been doing, and wanting to find themselves and feeling, okay, if I've got another 30, 40, 50 years on earth, like I want to enjoy them, and this isn't it. So I think that having people like you that know these tools, use these tools, can help, because yes, you can go through some of this by yourself, but there's so much information out there that it's, one, overwhelming, but two, you find things about yourself that sometimes are hard. You run into those shadow parts, and you run into self-awareness of things that you don't necessarily understand or want to deal with, and it can be really
Mhm.
easy to backtrack and say, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. But having somebody who can guide you through it and say, this is normal, it's okay, here's how we can get past that, is really crucial in these situations, because not everybody that you are associated with will understand what you're going through as you're going through it. And you might
Yeah.
want to reach out to a friend or a spouse or somebody, but they might not understand yet because
Sure.
it might be new to them as well. And that's why I
Yeah.
think what you do is really important, because people need those guides as they're approaching the stuff that you have been conditioned and trained to ignore or to not believe in. And when it pops up and what do I do with all of this? Stuff it back down. That's the wrong
Yeah.
answer. Don't stuff
Yeah.
it back down. Embrace it, acknowledge it, heal it, just something, but don't put it back where you found it.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned a great point too, though. When you're going through this whole process yourself, it can be a very lonely place, especially if you're surrounded by people who don't necessarily understand what it is you're going through or why you're even doing some of this work yourself. As some people are very happy and content with living their life on autopilot. And I know I struggled with that too initially. because my husband also an engineer. Love him. Very, very logical though, and not quite as open to the woo-woo stuff. And even though like I have some family that is starting to open up to this world, I couldn't really talk to them about that. So having other people that you can work with, I've worked with, I don't even know how many different practitioners, astrologers, readers, and all sorts of things over the years. And I think it has helped because we're not really meant to be doing this in a silo. Yes, there's a lot of inner work that you have to do on your own, but you can't completely do it all by yourself because it does get really lonely and it does get really hard, and sometimes you need somebody there to support you, and it can be incredibly challenging if you don't have that in your current environment.
For sure. And what I had to learn is that as I was waking up and learning about these things, I wanted to share them with everybody because it made so much sense, and I felt like
Mm-hmm.
it helped me answer questions that I didn't even know that I had. And I wanted to tell everybody, and not everybody around me wanted to understand it or wanted to be open to it. And it's not your place to wake other people up. They might not be awake in this lifetime. They're
Right.
not supposed to be, and that's okay. It's not your job to wake them up and try to get them to see things from this new point of view. This is when you're
Yeah.
supposed to wake up. This is how you do it. And it can be hard because it can be lonely and you want to get people that you care about on board with you, and we're all together in this process, but you're not supposed to. And if they do on their own, great, but if not, that's okay. But that's why it's good to seek out other people who might be already on this path or much, much further down it, because it is confusing because it's
Mm-hmm.
nothing that you've ever seen or dealt with before. And so as you're figuring stuff out, it's really helpful to have somebody who knows what to do.
Yeah. And I think that's been one of the big learning points for me. Growing up, I was kind of, I won't say forced, but like encouraged to be a lot more independent and do things on my own. And, asking for help was a sign of weakness and those sort of mindset things that
Yeah.
I dealt with. So learning that it was okay to ask for help and learning that you can grow more when you're working with somebody else or when you're within a community of other people who are also going through the same thing, and being open and vulnerable is incredibly healing, and it's incredibly helpful because I feel like a lot of the times along the way I would hear something from somebody else or somebody would say something and it set me down the path a little further. It was the next breadcrumb that I was getting from the universe to keep going. So opening yourself up to that is helpful.
Yes. And that's actually really important too, is the universe often speaks to us through other people.
Oh
That's
yeah.
something I didn't know or understand, but sometimes the people that are put in your path, sometimes good and bad, but that's
Mhm.
the crumb that you need to figure out, oh, I have this healing to do, or oh, that's something I want to learn about. Nothing really happens by accident. There's a reason for a lot of things that we tend to overlook, but
Yeah.
it's really awesome.
Yeah, like that first client that I was telling you about where I went to that fair, I that idea was never something I considered until somebody that I had met in a business group that I was in had mentioned that they were considering doing that. And I was like, oh, that's a really good idea. And so that's what like led me down that path. And as long as you're paying attention to what's going on around you and also paying attention to how you react to those things too, that will
Hmm.
be a really good indication of, maybe this is a line for me. Maybe this is what I should be doing, and just exploring it. Yeah.
That's why you keep your little handy dandy notebook nearby all the time. Now
Yeah.
that's awesome. Well, Susan, I want to be respectful of time. If anybody is listening to this and thinking, man, I need to find me a Susan so that I can learn more about these things and access the tools that I don't even know exist yet, how can they find you? How can they work with you? Just learn more about you.
Yeah. Well, I am on Instagram. I think that's probably the easiest way, or Threads. I know they're both connected. But my handle is Soul Coach Susan, and then my website is avoidingaverage.org. I also have a podcast called Avoiding Average, so welcome to join me on there as well. I'm open to connecting with anyone.
I will, as always, put that information in the show notes so people can connect. But before we wrap, any final thoughts, comments, any tidbits of wisdom you want to leave everybody with?
Oh, that is a good question. I feel like there's so many different things I could say. Oh man, I think just being open to whatever comes your way. We all have our own ways of deciding or discerning what's right for us, but at least being open to the opportunities that come by your path instead of immediately brushing them off. Because you never know where that'll take you.
Oh,
So that's it.
that's a good one. Just be open.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Erika.
This episode of Stumbling Forward was brought to you by Ori Ara's Self Care Collective. Real women, real lives and real self-care. It's empowering you to take care of yourself one day at a time. If you are interested in joining the Self Care Collective, there are discount codes on the screen. Stumbling Forward member will get you 20% off your first month's membership, or the Stumbling Forward founder will get you 20% off a lifetime membership.